We got a special guest in the Bob Schwartz Financial Studio today. Superintendent of USD 49, John Thissen, is with us, and Christina Janney of the Hayes Post in to talk with John Thissen about a very important issue, which is the new school bond.
Good morning, John. Can you tell us about some of the highlights of what will be built and renovated under this bond issue?
Sure, and good morning, Christina. It's nice to be able to share with you and others. Some of the highlights end up being probably, for those individuals that have been in the community for the last few years, a comparison of the last bond election that was put together and this one would be a highlight of it being quite different. The last bond election ended up being a project that was $94 million. This project is $78.5 million. A bit different that way, but it's not just a matter of the dollars, it's a matter of the scope of the project. The first project really dealt with it being some additions that were new, but pretty much everything was renovation. It was a matter of trying to fix what needed to be fixed. In this particular case, this project is one that's really quite opposite of trying to look into the future and trying to make changes so that Hayes has structures, has the schools that really are in great shape for the next 30 years. And in doing that, it's so different that there's actually two new elementaries as part of this particular project.
So why build two new elementary schools?
Good question. A lot of people would end up understanding why one. Okay, we end up having a couple buildings that are even 90 years old, and we have preschool and an elementary in those buildings. But the idea of having two came from the team's work on identifying how much it will cost to renovate Wilson Elementary compared to building new. It's really interesting. My background is completely school, but it's very interesting what you learn in working with architects and construction managers, but finding out that when you go over 60% of what would be new when you're trying to renovate, you start really considering whether it's worth it or not. In this case, it's 73%. Wilson is an older building than I thought as well. It ends up being in a position that the decision was for length of time, going into the future again for 30 years, 40 years, really felt that it was better to end up building new and put that little bit more money out for new instead of putting all that money into the renovation. I found it very interesting that there are some fast food chains that is their plan. They do not renovate. They end up tearing out and they build new. And it's based upon that same idea as far as the cost effectiveness.
How will the bond issue benefit students in the district?
Well, in this particular case, one of the items that was talked about an awful lot had to be with, we're working with buildings that have an average age that's actually 60, 62 years old. And they were built in a time that the strategies in teaching was quite different than what we're trying to use at this time. Not that they're completely, we still use lecture method, okay, but there are other methods that ends up having small groups, ends up having where students in the elementary would end up using other spaces than just sitting in rows, much like you would have seen maybe even just 20 years ago, that most classrooms was sit in rows and that's where you are through the whole day. So the space design is not right. And if you go to, I think it's safe to say, most any new building in the last 5-10 years, you will see that the structure and the arrangement of space for schools, elementary, middle, and high school, are quite different.
Why is now the right time to move forward with the bond?
Well, the right time is going to be a perception for everybody. You have individuals that would say that it's not. We need to wait more. Others would say it's past time. So it's largely perception. I feel it's the right time simply by seeing the exciting happenings in Hays. You look at the medical center, you look at Fort Hays State University, you look at the tech college. There's many things that are very good that's happening here in Hays, and to keep with it, the public schools need to. If you also, when I first came in a year ago, there was a very good drawing that was on the wall of my office that was a drawing that was done by an architectural firm 15 years ago. So even 15 years ago, there was an architect that was putting design as far as how to end up making changes with the school district. 8 years ago, another firm came on and was working with the school. 4 years ago, that same firm started putting together plans for needs assessment with the district, and then I say 4, it would have been 5. It was 9 years ago and 5 years ago, and then last year, of course, that all came to a bond election. So I guess I'd look at that as well and say that it's been worked on. It's been thought about by a lot of people for quite a bit of time, and so that's why I'd say it's the right time.
And if you notice, Fort Hays there's always construction going on. The University of Kansas, always construction going on. K-State, they're always building new buildings or putting new stuff in these buildings and updating the technology and the classroom in the college. So it just feels right that kids in elementary school and high school would have those same opportunities to sort of prepare themselves for the next step.
I'd agree with that. It ends up being, and it is something exciting for the Hays community to be able to toot their horn of being number 3 college in the state right now. But at the same time, it's a polling factor for this community. And the polling factor, I can't say that our schools, although we may have great education in them, the facilities themselves is not very exciting when you drive by or you walk in. They're old buildings.
Also, talking to the architects, they have said that as we wait, the cost of building is continuing to escalate with inflation.
Sure.
Is that a consideration as well?
Well, it always would be. It ends up being that case. It's a matter of to what degree, but there's no doubt that costs increase. And in this case, Christina, we end up having, we have the construction manager at risk. We have Nabolts that's on board that's helped us with those numbers. That's not the architectural firm that really put those together. It's Nabolts that did, and they're right in the mix of knowing what those numbers are. And those numbers come not from today. They actually figure them out, 2-3 years from now. So they're actually hitting the number. They're already figuring in more costs. So there can be people out there saying, well, it doesn't cost that much. You're right. It doesn't cost that much, right now, today. But it will cost that much, 2 years, 3 years from now in the process of completion for these projects. And it'll be more than that 10 years from now. Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about the cost and financing of the bond issue?
Yeah. We end up, I've been in a few communities before this, and this is the first one where I've been in a community that has no state aid. We are considered, Hays is considered a wealthy community, and we get no state aid. The community I was at before, when we had completed a project, got 48% was paid by other communities in the state.
Wow.
They paid 48% of the project. In our particular case, all 100% is going to be coming from this community. So that's one factor that the public, maybe some know, but not all, and that makes it more challenging financing. And that's why partly it was considered property tax. We know that's what a bond issue is going to be, a bond election is going to result in, but considered sales tax as well to balance that. Well, we did pursue that, the process of checking into it to see if there's that possibility, and it really clearly looked like the local government is not interested in that. So we, the Board of Education had met and said we're going to not follow that track at all and just stay away from it. But we do have another option, and we have had 8 mills dedicated to capital outlay for quite a number of years. We can actually take 2 of those mills and rededicate them to this project for new construction instead of capital outlay, which is typically fixing things. And it makes sense. If you're building new, you're not going to have as much need for that money for fixing when you have new. So we could dedicate the 2 mills to this project, and it helps keep the costs down. Instead of, again, that last project was like $24 a household. That's $150,000 home per month. This project is around $16 per month with that $150,000 home. And we feel that by doing this, it ends up making it more manageable, financially in doing this.
So I understand that a number of buildings would be vacated with the construction of the new schools and renovations. What will happen to the buildings in the school district that will be vacated?
Well, I know that in this project, Lincoln Elementary would be vacated, and at this point don't know. But depending upon the result of July 24th, where the board would end up approving this project or not, if they do approve it, then we know that we have a lot of work to do as to what the plan would be for that building. There's a number of things that can be done, but at this point, they really haven't been talked on to any degree and decided, but we feel we must have a plan in place to share with the public before it comes out that we're marketing for a bond election at some point. Washington is the other building that would be vacated, Washington Elementary, which is now Early Childhood Center. Those 2 buildings, same situation, and that's the one across from the swimming pool. O'Laughlin would be renovated, and we'd still be using it. The other building that we would not be using is Munger. I don't think a lot of people realize that Munger is used for preschool, very young children for preschool, but there's only about 18 or 19 children there, and we want to pull them into the programming here in Hayes. It would be financially, it just makes more sense instead of having another building on an outside community for only 18 children. And again, Munger, that facility in many ways is used tremendously by that community too. So I can tell you that building's not going to be tore down. It's not going to be probably sold. It's probably going to be just put back in the hands that the Munger community would be utilizing.
So the vision team has presented to the board this last Monday. What is the timeline for the progression of the bond issue from here on out?
Well, that depends upon, again, July 24th is a very important meeting to make a decision by the Board of Education. If they accept this plan, the timeline would be November. That would be the election there. I would say the benefit of it being then is because it's a regular election. If it's a special election, we have to fund it, and that could be $20,000 that we'd have to put out for it, which would draw some criticism, perhaps. I'm not saying that's bad. I don't know if I'm object to either way. It's just a matter that the first time we could probably have an election is in November, and there's some benefits of doing it at that time simply because it's already set and we don't have to put more money out for it.
So July 24th, that's the target date for the school board to actually vote on whether they will accept this proposal?
That's correct.
And so, again, Superintendent of USD 49, John Thissen, in with us here on the Eagle Morning Show. It just seems, from what I've perceived, is that parents that have kids in school currently are more in favor of this bond issue. And what do you guys say to the parents of kids that have left either Hayes or gone to college, not in school here anymore? How do you convince them that redoing these schools and doing all this stuff will help the just community in general?
Well, it isn't, and I understand completely. It is really hard to have an argument with anybody who has fixed incomes. Mm-hmm. You know, that's just, I have great understanding of that. But from the standpoint of any community, to end up keeping it thriving and keeping it, you have to be looking to the future. You know, if you end up are always looking in the rearview mirror, you're just not going to end up, if you don't pay attention to what's in front of you, you're going to end up at some point in trouble. And in our particular case, Hayes, if it's not right now, it's got to be very soon. I would say that there needs to be some real changes. A community's responsibility is public facilities. They pay taxes for roads. They pay taxes for the jail. They pay taxes for the courthouse. But the other piece is they pay taxes for schools. And that's always been the case. Actually, when they go back, if they would just think in 20 years ago, 40 years ago, there were other people that didn't want to pay for any kind of new construction at that time, but their children benefited from it. It ends up being, it's just a cycle. You're always in that cycle of someone has to end up realizing that there has to be money that's put out to end up improving your facilities within a community.
John, thanks for coming in and talking to us today. And you said July
24th.
July 24th is the next I guess thing in the timeline for this.
Right.
So honestly, we look forward to having you coming in and talking to us more about the bond issue as it moves forward.
Sounds great.
Christina, thank you for coming in with us for the Hayes Post, and we'll look forward to having you both back on with us in the future. You're listening to Eagle Morning Show on KAYS.